The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, and the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days who wish to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on S. 4926.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, before I yield myself such time as I may consume, I have a parliamentary inquiry. How many people are necessary to stand up to get a roll call vote?
The gentleman will suspend momentarily.
We'll see.
The yeas and nays can be supported by 1/5 of those members present.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, S. 4926, the Respect for Child Survivors Act, is bipartisan legislation that responds to the testimony of Olympian Michaela Maroney, who bravely shared her story with Congress alongside her fellow gymnasts Simone Biles, Maggie Nichols, and Ali Raceman. They told Congress about the abuse they faced at the hands of Larry Nassar and the failures of so many people to stop that abuse sooner. Maroney testified that she was interviewed by an FBI agent in 2015. She testified that she spoke to the agent over the phone for nearly 3 hours, recounting numerous molestations and answering every question, trusting that sharing this information would lead to action and to protecting other young women. I began crying at the memory over the phone, and there was just dead silence, Maroney testified. She said, "I was so shocked at the agent's silence and disregard for my trauma." Unfortunately, it was not until 17 months later that the agent even documented the interview. Unsurprisingly, it did not accurately describe Maroney's account of the abuse she experienced. The Respect for Child Survivors Act seeks to ensure that no one will experience what Michaela Maroney experienced when she trusted the FBI with the most personal traumatic memories. This legislation requires the FBI to use multidisciplinary teams of experts when investigating cases of child sexual abuse, the production of child sexual abuse material, and child trafficking. These experts must receive training on special victims' crimes, including child sexual abuse, and they must provide trauma-informed care. The use of these multidisciplinary teams would prevent the re-traumatization of victims who come forward seeking justice. The bill also requires the Director of the FBI to annually report to the Attorney General about any interview of a victim reporting child sexual abuse material or child trafficking that took place without the use of a multidisciplinary approach or a trained forensic interviewer. The bill also encourages the FBI to work with multidisciplinary teams at existing children's advocacy centers as established by the Victims of Child Abuse Act. The bill ensures that the FBI gives Children's Advocacy Center personnel access to critical case information so that victims can get the medical, mental health, and advocacy services they need. Finally, the bill requires that child sexual abuse and child trafficking cases are reviewed by a multidisciplinary team at regularly scheduled times so that the team can share information about case progress, address any investigative or prosecutorial barriers, and ensure that victims receive support and needed treatment. This provision would ensure that none of these serious cases is neglected and that children are not endangered by a failure to investigate. I thank Senator Cornyn, Senator Coons, Senator Grassley, and Senator Klobuchar for introducing this important legislation in the Senate. And I thank Congressman Costa and Congressman Gonzalez for championing it in the House. I hope my colleagues will join me in supporting this bipartisan, bicameral legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Senate Bill 4926, the Respect for Child Survivors Act, requires the FBI to use multidisciplinary teams when investigating certain crimes involving children. This requirement includes, for example, situations where the interviewed victim is no longer a child, but was the victim of a crime as a child. The multidisciplinary teams would consist of a variety of professionals trained to work with children who had been victims of a crime. The goal of using these multidisciplinary teams is to prevent re-traumatizing victims. Senate 4926 also contains provisions related to information sharing and case review for crimes involving children. These provisions would hopefully ensure that these cases are not forgotten or simply dropped without review. I would reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from Texas, a member of the Judiciary Committee, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the chairman and the manager of this bill. Mr. Speaker, let me let everyone see this picture, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. It is Michaela and a constituent of mine, Simone Biles. As indicated, these women have spent years of investing in their sport and rising to the level of excellence, and they are victims that should have not occurred. I rise to support the Respect for Child Survivors Act, and Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to place this article in the record. This bill was inspired by the heroic testimony of gymnast and survivor Michaela Maroney, who came before Congress to share a story of the abuse she and more than 100 others faced at the hands of Larry Nassar. Michaela told Congress that when she was asked to speak to the FBI about Nassar's abuse, she told them everything. She poured her heart out to them. She spoke to FBI agents over the phone for 3 hours. Can you imagine how painful that was? As she sat on the floor of her bedroom, recounting details of molestation, information she had not even shared with her mother. She wanted to make a difference. She wanted to protect others. She said it was the most uncomfortable conversation I had ever in my life, but I thought, as uncomfortable it was, I was making a difference and hopefully protecting others from the same abuse. I thought and trusted that they would act quickly for the sake of our other girls. I waited and waited and waited and heard nothing. They did nothing. We know now that the FBI's failure to listen to Michaela and other survivors allowed Nassar to continue his abuse, his torture of these young, beautiful women and continue to molest them, our outstanding athletes who we cheer and are so proud when we're looking at the Olympics. Look what they had to suffer. These young women made great sacrifice to pursue their sport and represent the best of their country. They put their safety in the hands of their coaches and their doctors and ultimately the FBI, the people who were all supposed to protect them but failed. I'm very grateful to Congressman Costa and Gonzalez and all the sponsors in the Senate. And as the chair of the Subcommittee on Crime, Terrorism, Homeland Security, we had a hearing dealing with the human trafficking issues. This is a mighty powerful bill. We hope that we will pass a no trafficking zone bill in the other body that complements this. Because I don't know if anybody realizes this is a scourge, it's an epidemic, and this bill will provide for wraparound services so that whatever is said by a child, that this can now be utilized to protect others. That's what the no trafficking zone is about, and that's what we're trying to protect. As I close, Mr. Speaker, I want everybody to realize that just in the last 24 hours, they talked about a sextortion campaign against young boys. Where do they do it? Online. Where are children online? At schools, among other places, to extort from children who are asked to take pictures of themselves. This legislation is crucial. The no trafficking zone legislation is crucial. We hope that it will pass as well, and we are grateful for the work that has been done. Finally, let me say that I congratulate those who supported the Equal Pay for Team USA Act of 2022. I couldn't support it even more. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Texas yields. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would reserve, but I would like to let the gentleman from New York know that we have no further speakers, and I am prepared to close.
Gentleman from
We have no further speakers, and we're prepared to close.
Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized to close.
Mr. Speaker, I would simply urge members to support this legislation. I would yield back the balance of our time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this legislation is endorsed by the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, the National District Attorneys Association, Army of Survivors, and National Children's Alliance. We must do better in helping survivors seek justice. I urge my colleagues to support this important legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House, gentleman from New York yields back. Reserves? Yield, okay. The question is, will the